Saturn in astrology, my best friend. I'm going to read from this book here, The Techniques of Practical Magick by Phillip Cooper. And I'm not going to say that I believe everything in this book is true, or from a lot of these authors, but it's pretty good book. You can see I got a signed copy somehow. Don't ask me how I pulled this off, but I did. And it's a nice little book if you can find one. But Saturn. There's always the temptation when dealing with Saturn to let its somewhat sinister reputation color our thinking. After all, the word Saturn is not unlike Satan, who in turn is hardly representative of beneficence and kindness. Now, I'm a Capricorn Sun, Capricorn rising. I grew up with in the sports, being really into sports. Had some like rough situations that I've been in, but I loved it. When I was younger, I loved it. As I'm getting older, and these similar situations, I don't like it, because as a kid, I could get away with being bad. I could get away with getting into stuff, and my parents would always bail me out. Somehow I was a lucky kid. Somehow I got away with stuff that I still get away with stuff, but still, like there's stuff that I should have got hammered for when I was younger. But yeah, Capricorn rising, Capricorn sun, Saturn at the top of the chart there in Scorpio with Pluto, and maybe we'll get into more of that as I go along here. To the uninitiated, Saturn is a rather drab, lonely planet, apparently well represented by old Father Time, who never smiles, nor does he appear to have anything to do other than plod along, getting older and more tired with each step. That part there about never smiling, one thing I have happened to me over and over and over again, especially in the workplace, which I cannot stand when people tell me to smile. And I was in my Saturnian workplace as a young teenager when I started working, getting into some serious work, some serious Saturn work at 17. And these people, they were fun, but these people never skipped out on telling me to smile. And why do I look so mean, lonely, depressed, when I was none of those things? Absolutely none of those things. And this continued. This still happens to me to this day. Saturn is blamed for all manner of unfortunate occurrence, and like its metal, lead, it seems to weigh heavily on our souls. Although it cannot be denied that there are problems with Saturn energies, these are mostly avoidable, and its overgeneralized malefic reputation is not fully justified on close examination. Let us now examine Saturn's energies in a realistic light. I swear sometimes this is not, I don't know if this is true, but I sense that people, when people are coming down on me, and I'm talking about specifically in the workplace, I sense that it's total projection and it's total sensing on their part Saturnian energies that are believed, from their perspective, that are believed to be quote unquote satanic or malefic, or these dark terms that these people are picking up on, because they actually really do feel or think this way about Saturnian energies. And I don't know if I came across clear with that, but I sense that has actually happened to me. I can't prove that, but it seems to be true. When again, I am nothing of the sort at all. So Saturn is the planet of stability, and any form of stability must represent restriction of one sort or another. What kind of mad world would we live in if there were no stabilizing influence? It would be impossible. Without gravity, we would float off into deep space without friction. Nails and screws would simply fall out, and car brakes would be ineffective. Without wind resistance, an arrow would never stop. The Saturn effect certainly has its uses if we care to look a little deeper. So he's talking about some things that are associated with Saturn that are necessary, or things that we would value in our world that people don't think of too often. And this idea of stability, I'm not crazy about stability. I understand it. I seek it. I think I've been learning in my life about stability. I'll say that. For me specifically, part of the problem concerning man's fear or dislike of restriction is due to wrong interpretation of the laws of the cosmos. Absolutely. There are so many people in this world that absolutely misinterpret, have a wrong interpretation of the Saturnian influence in this world. Work, for example. People despise work, and sometimes rightfully so. I'm not saying that work, it's not work. Here's where the misinterpretation, the wrong interpretation comes in. It's not work. It's things like, let's say you work a 40-hour work week, and you have to work 9 hours. So you're there for 9 hours, and then it's a 30-minute commute, and then you have to eat breakfast, you have to eat dinner, all these things, and you have to do that 5 days a week. That may be interpreted as being something to hate because it's overdone. It's too much. If you just knock that down to say 6 hours a day, if you could possibly pull that off, then the Saturn part with the work and the restriction would be more balanced. It wouldn't be so demonized. However, in many cases, people can't figure out how to do that because of the culture. Society maybe has a 40-hour work week. The way people trying to figure out the money and the way to work, the health insurance and stuff like that, it's not that simple. So Saturn can get that bad rap because of that situation. Part of the problem, said that already, priests have for countless centuries led us to believe that life was a restriction in itself. They gave us gods who apparently had a purpose for man, which inevitably implied that someone or something out there had decided what our future must be and how this should be best governed. How silly. They also invented the most appalling laws which, apart from bearing no resemblance to reality, gave man an overplus of negativity. In short, he learned that the laws were absolute, he could do nothing about them, so he had better learn to comply. The matter is all the more sad because the entire concept was and still is inaccurate. Man began to expect the worst, so naturally he got it. As you believe, so you are. So maybe people that have came before us, people that are, society, part of society, the group, the consensus, have created these things, or should say man, as us, we are really all a part of each other, have created this thing, and a lot of us will look at it and say, that's restriction, that's Saturn is bad. It's the use of the energies of what we have done for whatever reason. And we can come up with many reasons why it has been done. And then he talks about priests. And interesting thing about priests, I did spend, because I did grow up Catholic, as I became an adult later. I had things happen, and I really enjoyed the contemplation and the Saturnian element of going to Catholic Mass on a daily basis, especially when I was close to a church or to a Catholic church where I could walk there, and which happened a couple times in my life, a couple different places. One of them was a cathedral that, in my opinion, probably is one of the most beautiful cathedrals that you will ever attend. And it was in my local area within walking distance for a time. And, things like that, I no longer am Catholic, but the habits or the process of all of that, I still would, I think, have benefits, and I'm still attracted to. The meditation, even the aura of the church, etc., etc. And I also remember one time walking through the mall, and I had people come up to me a couple different times and talk to me as if they're trying to recruit me for their church, as if I was the one, as if I was Neo. I was the one, and I just laughed. It was funny. This was after all the Catholic stuff and after astrology, and it was funny. Of course, there are laws, but unlike man-made laws, which are based on the need to inflict fear and oppression on people, cosmic laws are there to be used. They are always beneficial, regardless of the dubious interpretations arrived at by supposedly enlightened men. No cosmic laws exist other than to be creative and to aid creation. This is the absolute truth. Problems arise by wrong usage of these laws, which in turn are caused by wrong beliefs. It is not possible to live without cosmic laws. The absence of laws give rise to chaos, and there can never be chaos in the creative scheme. All is in precise order, as is perfection, and all is as it should be. How can this be true, you may ask, when there appears to be so much chaos in the world and so many things that are wrong? A good question, but you should already know the answer. And oftentimes this abuse of Saturn, the abuse of these laws, and maybe the reason why these laws have to be in place, because personally we don't have control or some control of ourselves in a sense of creating some moderation. And that could be because of external influences. But I just think of some of the things that, if you think of our sexuality and controlling that, and things getting out of hand, and all of the Christian things and the laws that maybe, and the way people act around all that, maybe because of that, because we aren't able to moderate that ourselves and revere it from a Saturnian standpoint, but not from a Saturnian man-made law standpoint, but from a Saturnian standpoint of regulating ourselves, and possibly I don't want to use the word worship, but creating some routine around it, or some putting it in its proper place. I don't know if I'm really explaining that correctly. Given that cosmic laws are true and that they are unwavering in their action, given that the subconscious mind always responds to our beliefs, given that the subconscious produces physical effects which are always in keeping with these beliefs, is it not true that all is really perfect and as it should be? Think about this carefully. You believe, using your own free choice to do so. Therefore, you are responsible for the physical effects which surround you. In truth, you are getting perfection. Your subconscious mind is providing exactly what you believe to be true, and therefore appear to want. All is therefore as it should be. It cannot be any other way. Matters change only when you change your beliefs. This is when he starts to get into things that I'm a little bit skeptical. I understand what he's talking about. I'm not saying that it's not real. I'm just saying that it's the way it's written is if we have complete control over all of this, and as I said before, we all are connected, and I don't think it is as simple as changing your beliefs and improving or changing your subconscious mind and all that. Then all of a sudden your external reality is going to reflect that. It may improve, that may change slightly, but I don't think it's like, in a sense, you can create a paradise and get over all the subconscious minds of everyone else who's around you. And speaking of subconscious mind, and this is often, I think, the Saturnian piece that many people are missing. The Saturnian piece, in the sense, this is a lot of work. And I remember when I first came to realization of this idea of changing your beliefs and changing your thoughts, and I would play around with it. And I'm sure I've spoken about this before, where I would change my beliefs about something and just let it sit for a while, live my life for a year, and see what happens. And it is true that I do think my life changed, but not really from a standpoint of like making more money or something like that, but just about general beliefs. I think my mental health in the sense of my mind and my brain changed for the better, and I was healthier, and at the end of the day, I was satisfied with that process. And I think that people don't want to do that part. That they don't want to do the work. That's a trendy thing to say. There's a lot of fear around that too. Saturn, fear. There's a lot of fear around doing this subconscious work. There's a lot of power there. I mean, there could be a lot of power in it. Saturnian things are often, think of Saturn as being long-term change. You might lose a lot of people in your life if you do that. Maybe they know that subconsciously. I don't know. Matters change only when you change your beliefs. In which case, your circumstances will automatically change to suit this new directive, and you will, once again, have a perfect result. Creation creates with great precision and total perfection, and you have the power of creation by using your mind to direct life energies according to your desires. Now, from a more fated standpoint, a more astrologically fated standpoint, one could also argue that the karma or the fate of a person doesn't allow them to do that work. At least not abruptly. And it will be in due time, whereas people will say astrological time or divine timing is trendy. And maybe that is true. As an astrologer, I do see some of that. I could see that being true to some degree. Perhaps we ought to look a little deeper at the supposed malefic tendencies of Saturn. There are many, the main one being that Saturn is a tester of mankind. The idea that Saturn or its gods represent a tester for mankind is absolute rubbish, and came into being as a result of the misguided, muddled thinking of priests. If we are to presume that the creative spirit conceived and then created man, why on earth should he need to test him? Test for what? Surely the all-knowing, all-seeing, all-perfect God would know what he was giving birth to in the first place. Would not you think? The idea of testing humans is an old one, which was born out of apparent necessity. After all, if you are about to elect a new tribal leader, he would have to prove that he was the best. No one wanted a weakling in charge, for this could lead to all manner of catastrophes. Kings and priests were tested to see if they were capable of shouldering the responsibilities of their office. This, again, could be a reflection of the beliefs of society and the operation of society and the agreements that we have made. And I think that's what he's saying here, Saturn being a tester. Kings and priests were tested to see if they were capable of shouldering the responsibilities of their office. Unfortunately, this became the norm for mankind in the wrong context. Evidence of this can be seen in lodge initiations in which the candidate is subjected to various ordeals. Perhaps there is some validity in this. I'll repeat that. Perhaps there is some validity in this. But what possible truth can be gained from these absurd nudity pantomimes often put forward to being essential to growth? Makes me think of maybe a job. You get a job, and you're kind of tested. Can you make it? Are you going to make it? And oftentimes, this is the interesting thing. Oftentimes, these jobs are so easy. If you know anything about business, I read this business book a long time ago, and of course, me being the person I am, I like to do things uniquely and be different. And I had these original ideas, but when you're doing business, you don't necessarily want to do that. I forget what the book was called, but it's a famous book. And it talks about how you make it easy. You get the process down and you make it easy. And you do that so that when people come in, employees come in, or people come in to be employees, they can copy it, they can learn it, and they can repeat it easily. You don't make it difficult. So these businesses, they do that, these big businesses, because they're smart. Especially if they've been in business for a long time. This is it's kind of like a natural thing. It's like it's like following nature. Okay, you make it simple, you make it easy, you make it repeatable, and they do that. And yet, there still is this turnover, as if people are being tested. There's something I think to be said about that. That maybe they're not being tested. Maybe they're just using the turnover. Or accepting the turnover because it's easy, and or just a turnover, a reflection of certain things, and it's turned into this thing being tested. The church, in its ignorance, with its fetish for sin, came up with the idea of Satan or the devil. The strange creature was given the job of testing mankind's fitness for heaven. To pass such tests, man was supposed to adhere to the most ridiculous ideals imaginable, and the list of forbidden fruits grew day by day as overzealous priests began to believe in and inflict their idea of good. That's the interesting thing. Like someone like me, I always felt like in certain arenas I can be tested. Certain places I will fail a test miserably, but like think of athletics. I would probably pass more than most people with like strength, being able to do certain things for long periods of time. And I say that, bring this up to say about priests. Maybe these priests had very much Saturnian influences in their life or in their natal chart, and then they're inflicting their idea for good onto people, and people are buying it. You can also think of Jupiter as well being a seller, and they're selling it. It's like this combination of Jupiter and Saturn, and they may have the qualities to pull that off, but the public, most of the people that are there in their congregation, do not, which could cause a lot of problems, which it probably has. The strange thing is that the devil seemed to have all the nice things in life, while God offered nothing other than penance and poverty. You will note that the church rarely conformed to its own laws. The list of taboos is almost endless, making it virtually impossible for any sane person to even begin to avoid such things. Sex became dirty. How on earth was man supposed to continue his existence? And we were all warned of the perils of the flesh. In short, Adam, another mythical being, followed his natural urges, and so the whole process was condemned. Who invented Adam? And who invented Eve? Who invented the whole sad misconception? Need I answer this? As a direct result of the idiotic rambling of the law-making priests, man has now inherited a tremendous problem. The problems for women are even worse, for, according to religion, they are the guilty party. Can anything be more ludicrous than this? Indeed. The testing of man's fitness to enter a spiritual state of existence has become the backbone of religion and an integral part of contemporary occult thinking. This misconception is based on man's supposed fall from grace and has resulted in all manner of strange dogmas such as karma, reincarnation, and of course an overwhelming belief that the material is evil. None of these concepts are correct. Karma is the result of religion gone mad. Reincarnation as a compulsive cycle has no basis in truth, and the material can never be classified as evil. The material simply is. It is our reaction to and our manipulation of the material that is the real cause of trouble. Again, I'm not saying that in theory what he's saying is true, that theoretically, if we all were enlightened beings, even if we all were, let's just say this is true, and we all understood this, lived it, etc., and life changed, it's never gonna happen. It's never gonna happen. I don't know where, and that's not being negative. Like it's just think about it. I don't know. I mean, not in our lifetime. It's not under our control, that's for sure. No, I'm not saying that. I mean, all you have to really do is take this and go out and try to teach it to 10 people in real life and watch what happens. So, in reality, it's a little bit more problematic. And again, the idea of reincarnation not being real and karma, again, all you got to do is find some people that you think are karmically stubborn, for lack of a better term, and try to break them out of it. And you'll see how difficult it is. And then almost to a certain, and I'm not saying this is true, but almost to a certain degree that there's some kind of underlying spirit or something that is just not going to break down. So I'm going to let you in. Man has a knack of blaming anything other than himself for his troubles and apparent failures. This is the result of religious indoctrination over many centuries. What could be more natural than to blame the very thing that appeared to be causing the problem? After all, if you are perfectly honest, if your car will not start, is it not the fault of the car? There are numerous other examples if you care to think about it, but in reality, it can never be the fault of some material object. It has been made by man, and therefore any faults are man-made. Again, I'm not saying he's not right, but I'm not blaming like religion in the sense of like all religions are like this guy is very, very much on the path of breaking free from the religious chains that Saturn has people locked up in. I think he's like recently coming out of that at some point after these or before these writings. Which is when I found this material, essentially. It is very fashionable and trendy to deny the material side of life in favor of a more spiritual outlook, but you are urged to think about this carefully. The material can be troublesome, not because it is evil, but simply because it responds to our thinking. If our thinking is wrong, then the physical effects are wrong. And though it is natural to blame physicality, this solves nothing. It is equally pointless to blame circumstances, for these too are manufactured by thinking patterns rather than so-called fate. Those who try to deny the material or consider it to be evil are deluding themselves and causing a great deal of self-suffering. Beliefs always get results, and so for these individuals, the physical side of life will tend to be barren and unproductive. Worse still is the mass effect on human thinking, as the prophets of this form of unreality try to inflict their views on others, usually succeeding in their efforts. I think a better way to look at this, because I think a lot of people, the people that are doing what he's saying, blaming the material, anti-material, wanting to be favoring the spiritual side of life, the contemplative side, etc., etc. A better way to look at this is they're ignoring the material. They're ignoring Saturn. And if you're ignoring something, then it's, you could be out of balance, and you choose to spend more time in your spiritual life, and then you're neglecting the material life. And by doing that, you kind of can get yourself into trouble. And when things go wrong, you're blaming the material, but really in reality, it's you didn't respect Saturn. You didn't respect the material because you're living here on Earth. You're a material being. And I think that's something to note here, that these planets, you could say Saturn wants attention. Saturn demands attention, just like Venus demands attention. All the planets demand attention. All facets of life can demand attention from you if you ignore them to a point of extremes. And if we look at your natal chart, that's why we look at the natal chart. Some people can get away with that, with their circumstance in life, and then, i.e., we could say their natal chart. And some people, that they're usually the ones that are suffering, they could be not respecting their reality, not respecting their natal chart, or other people just say not respecting reality. We could do this without astrology. Another problem with its roots in religion is that of presuming that we must resist the temptations afforded by this planet. If people continue to believe that this is true, then they simply deny themselves many pleasures or feel guilty if they succumb. Let's be realistic. Firstly, you always have free choice, so it is entirely up to you when you accept or decline. In any case, let common sense be your guide. If you indulge in something that is harmful, that is your choice, but you must weigh up the facts, for it is you who must face the problems created by this act. See, he's kind of getting into this now. You can, again, like I was talking about the priests, some people can deny pleasures of life and get away with it. Other people, like I know for myself right now, when I was younger, I could get away with it. Right now, and I'm not going to speculate on the reasons or get into the reasons, but right now, if I deny myself pleasures or having like free time to do things that are good for me or that are you could call pleasure or leisure, working 10 hours a day, etc., I will realize very quickly that I'm harming myself. When I was younger, I didn't have that, and it took longer. If you know my story, it took a lot of pain and suffering before I realized I was harming myself. But again, some people, like then I was, maybe like I said, the priest can get away with that. It depends on their natal chart or their personal circumstance and things like that. No God or other entity is trying to trap you or test your fitness for heaven. This is absurd. Deal with life in your own way, even if you do make mistakes. Far better to have tried and failed than to live in some cloud cuckoo land of inverted idealism. Perhaps the greatest guide to the reality of life, especially its physical existence, is the Kabbalistic tree of life. All too often, would-be occultists use this symbol, yet fail to recognize its emphatic message, that all energies impact on Earth and find their fruition therein. Man's role in this is simply one of exercising his free choice, to use these energies as he wills according to understanding and knowledge. Just talking about the tree of life. When you look at oftentimes the tree of life is used to teach, can be used to teach different energetic paths that people choose or they find themselves in life, where they have the 3 pillars and the center pillar, the path, because let's say we're looking at the paths in a sense back to God or spiritually back to the unknown, whatever you want to call it. The center path is the quickest, or they would teach, and then you have maybe you have the right hand path is the more moral, or what we know as the more moral path, and then you have the left hand path is known as more the darker path, or the rebellious path, maybe you could call it for lack of a better term. And then there's the you also could have the, I think it's called the sword, or it's like a jagged path where you're going to the right, you're going through the center to the left, back through the center to the right, up all the way up the tree that way. So it's just really showing that there are, well, in one sense, it's showing that there's multiple paths to find God. And again, that could be reflected in astrology. We see that we could correlate the Kabbalah, the tree of life, to someone's astrology and see what path they're likely on coming into life at least, or what they favor. And you can do that through interviewing them as well, or just looking at their life. The tree, man's role in this is simply one of exercising his free choice to use the energies as he wills, according to his understanding and knowledge. The tree may certainly teach knowledge that is spiritual in nature, but it also teaches practicality, a fact that is missed by most students and teachers. The tree does not teach or imply compulsion, coercion, or self-restriction, and so it is with life if only people would realize this. So much wisdom in the Kabbalah, and yet again, it is demonized for unknown reasons, like astrology. And again, with religions and other teachings and other philosophies in life and other ways of being, there's pieces of the Kabbalah and astrology in it. From what I see, there's pieces of it, but they don't have the full picture. And when I say that, I don't mean to sound like a Christian minister. I used to say as a Catholic, we used to say, oh, the other Christians, they have part of the picture. They don't have the full picture, or they don't have the full truth. They have part of the truth. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that some wisdom, I guess the better way to put it is some of the things you can learn from astrology and Kabbalah, you can learn by being involved in Christianity as well. But some of the things I'm talking about, I do not think you're going to find it in Christianity. Some of the things in the Kabbalah or astrology, it's just not there. Is the way it's taught, is the way you would understand it through these other mediums. The problems of Saturn do not belong to the planet or its energies. They exist only in the minds of men as misconceptions and wrong ideals. These are handed down or inherited and simply accepted without thought, causing all manner of problems. Let's look at some examples. So we get into some examples, which are fear, these examples that exist in the minds of men, the reflections of Saturn. They aren't really necessarily saying, they're not necessarily Saturn. They're fear, negative thinking, the facts, responsibility, depression, worry, loneliness, death, phobias. So I think when he's talking about these things, not in extreme case, not in a clinical state of depression, not in, there's something wrong with your physiology, or you've gone something has occurred that is affecting your physiology, leading to depression. He's talking about the mind and the thoughts. Normal of a quote unquote normal average human being. There are two types of fear: that which is essentially self-protective and therefore useful, and that which is based on preconditioning around the needs of society. We all have a fear mechanism. It protects us in times of danger by giving us strong sensations and certain bodily chemical reactions. This type of fear is quite natural. Without it, we would be unable to recognize and react to danger. The second type is completely useless, being based on intangibles. Let me illustrate. Our normal fear reaction moves in when we are faced with some obvious problem, such as a hooligan with a gun or a falling rock. We see the danger, and then our fear mechanism warns us of the danger. This type of fear is selective and therefore useful. Negative fears work largely in the imagination as a result of the conditioning given to us by society, religion, parents, and so forth. They are irrational and largely unfounded, being based on superstition rather than probable fact. People spend vast amounts of time indulging in fear and phobias, such as fear of spiders, to the exclusion of reality. It is rarely realized that, apart from being non-productive in real terms, this sort of fear can actually do a great deal of damage because it is a belief pattern. Our normal fears move in when something is actually happening. Negative fears prey on the mind and are concerned with possible circumstances rather than actualities. There is little point in fearing what may happen. Far better to use creative thinking and to be positive, because there is always the danger that fears may come true. You think of like Saturn as the dark too, like Saturn being afraid of the dark. A lot of people are afraid of the dark, as a kid. And a lot of this actually, I think, improved when I talk about how it's improved a life, or like the subconscious and things like that. I don't really fear the dark anymore, like I did as a child, or even as a young adult, or even as an adult. Especially in my own apartment. Now, I'm sure there's other circumstances where it might be a little bit different, but generally speaking, our normal fear. Be rational about fears. Are they justified or are they speculative? If the latter applies, then throw them out of your mind quickly. Think about your fears, face up to them, and have the courage to question their validity. You will be surprised at the results. If you would be a magician, fear is one of the first things you must beat, especially superstitious fears such as the supposed effects of fate, karma, or the will of gods. I would challenge people, as he's saying, to challenge fate and karma. Any thoughts you have about that before you admit that something is fated. Even though I believe in fate, or or in karma and things like that, or at least I lean towards that way, I still challenge them if I think I need to do something that I think I need to do or want to do. I just did it recently, and maybe I'll tell that story at another time. And I failed again. So that's what I'm saying. In those circumstances, I'm starting to think, look, there's no way around it. I mean, but then again, I'm saying, like, I'm still not saying that it's impossible forever. Maybe when I'm like 60 or 70, I have a similar experience. Because I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, maybe I challenge it again in like 10 years or 20 years or 5 years, and it works. But for now, it ain't working. Defy these idiotic ideas, challenge them, and subject them to the light of scrutiny. Why believe in fate and non-existent gods? These absurdities can rule your life if you let them, even to the point of preventing success altogether. Is it worth having such fears? Negative thinking. This is akin to fears because it is based on presumption rather than fact. Once again, it is a result of the conditioning given to each of us by society. We learn to think negatively almost from the moment we are born. It becomes habitual, so we do not notice it. Look at the way in which you face problems, especially your normal reactions. Are these positive, self-assertive, and confident, or are they negative? Do you shy away or even run from troubles? Do you hide in a corner? If you do, does it solve anything? The answer is no. In order to gain, you must be in control, so retreating in this way is simply valueless. In any case, what are you running from? What are you running away from? An actuality or a presumption? So, look at the way in which you face problems. I think, it's important, I think it's important with negative thinking too. If you have negative thoughts, like he's talking about running away from troubles or shying away from things, when I was talking about challenging things, to face them and see what happens. For example, you could take YouTube channel. If someone out there wants to be an astrologer or wants to learn astrology partially through teaching, start a YouTube channel, etc., and you have negative thoughts about yourself or negative thoughts about doing it, you have to think about it in a way of, well, I'm going to do it and see what happens. I'm going to challenge those thoughts. All those negative thoughts, I'm going to do it and see what happens and see if the thoughts that I'm having are true. And maybe some of them will be true and many of them won't be. And maybe you'll come to the realization that it's not, to that end, it's not for the purpose of you judging yourself. It's up to them to judge. It's up to the other people, the viewers, to judge you. And they have the prerogative to judge you in any way that they want, which is a whole nother interesting facet of that. In magic, negative thinking can prevent success without your knowing it, which is why you are urged to spend time in regular sessions of creative thinking after a ritual. Creative thinking keeps the channels of power open and helps you to beat down those negative thought patterns. Use it. Constructive. Constructive is another word for Saturn. So you think of the more the lower level or the unattractive parts of Saturn, the fear, the negative thinking, but Saturn is also constructive. So instead of using negative thinking, critical thinking, creative thinking, constructive thinking, construct something, build something. Saturn wants you to build. Saturn wants you to build. And if you don't build, if you're having negative thoughts and things like that, and it could be because you're not building. Saturn doesn't care if anyone's paying you. I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not even monetized yet. I'll tell you right now, I'm so far. I stopped even trying. I came up with a new plan, but essentially it was supposed to get done in a year. It didn't get done. I moved to something else that was working. And that's just what I had to do. It is a true fact that the way we think determines what happens to us. This is the absolute truth, regardless of religious viewpoints. If our dominant thoughts are negative, then we receive the same from life. It can and does become a vicious circle. We start by becoming being negative, which in turn creates negative problems, generating even more negative thoughts, as we presume the worst, and so on ad infinitum. Once the simple fact is grasped that a negative approach gains nothing, then the circle is halted. Naturally, better results occur, but one has to make the effort in the first place. I think this idea of negative, he's talking about negative thoughts. If we have negative thoughts, we receive the same from life. I don't know that many, again, amongst like the majority of people, I don't know that many of them actually have all negative thoughts that are just making their life worse. It's like a mix. that's keeping them held in the balance of where they're at. In this world, we are taught from an early age that the facts are unchangeable and cannot... Okay, so he's talking about the facts now. In this world, we are taught from an early age that the facts are unchangeable and cannot be argued with. This is rubbish. If you are going to become a practical occultist, then you will have to reject this idea. Acceptance that the facts cannot be changed is a pattern of belief. We all have this belief, and sooner or later, we have to throw it out in favor of reality. A wise man looks at the physical facts, sees them as being obvious, and then realizes that the physical is composed of matter and energy. Energy can be controlled by his subconscious mind, and therefore the physical can be altered or made to respond. Extreme examples of this can be seen in telekinesis, in which physical objects are made to move around by pure thought. The facts may well speak for themselves, so we are told, but the plain truth is that these facts were created by minds, and if this is true, then they are not real in the truest sense of the word. They are transient and therefore alterable. Perhaps the easiest facts to alter are those that are not strictly physical. Take, for example, the fact that your earnings are not sufficient for your needs. There is an element of presumption in this. At any time, those earnings could be boosted to realistic levels simply by believing that this will happen. You do not attempt to alter this week's pay packet. Instead, you alter the future projection. There is quite a difference between the two approaches, yet all too often the would-be occultist attempts to influence the present facts instead of the possibilities. Once something is factual, it is difficult to change. By far the easiest way to do so is to determine what the future will bring in and not let things continue as they are. This is one of the real secrets of magic. This can take, he's talking about patience here too. He's not leaving out patience. The facts, if this is to work, Saturn is patient. Saturn will work with you. But over time, Saturn's time schedule is probably not the same as your time schedule. Now, is that a fact? Is that a belief that you do or don't want to have? See, that's where I get like my mind just gets twisted around, and it's just most of the time I'm just don't want to think to that degree in my life right now. At this moment, anyway. The alternative is one of either accepting things as they are or trying to alter something that is already in existence. Not an easy task. So I guess he's saying it's better to try and not alter what is, but look into the future and see what could potentially change in your life through these change of beliefs and change of the facts. Like, I guess it's thinking like it's a fact that I have to work 40 hours a week. It's a fact that I have to work 40 hours a week in this job right here, maybe. But see, then looking into the future is not a fact that I have to work a 40-hour work week. If I start thinking and believing in different ways and acting, as he says, trying to alter something, that could be in the future, not what's going on right in this minute. There's a great deal of profound sense in the statement, prevention is better than cure, so it is with magic. Projection is better than prolongation. She's talking about magic here. The more positive side of Saturn becomes obvious when one considers its nature. Saturn is the planet of solidity and stability, both of which are essential to life. If there is power, then this power is useless unless it can attain form. Saturn gives form through its stabilizing influence. Without the Saturn principle, he would be composed of formless energy in an equally formless universe. What a boring thought. To use the energies of Saturn is no more difficult than to use the power of any other planet, providing that the now predominant negative ideas are cast aside. Some of these have already been discussed, but there are other problems Saturn rituals may be used to alleviate. Responsibility. There's nothing wrong with responsibility. In fact, we cannot avoid it. However, it is quite possible that we are taking on far too much out of a sense of duty. Do ask yourself, duty to what? That reminds me of, I was in downtown recently where I live, and there's homeless camps everywhere, and they're getting bigger. I don't remember seeing this when I was younger. And you think of, okay, well, you're assuming that, a lot of people assume that these people are avoiding responsibility. Could be other things, but a lot of people assume that they're avoiding responsibility by not paying their bills and not living in society and getting a job, and who knows what they do. But they're down here living in this homeless camp. But then you see that they're building and building this homeless camp. That's a responsible thing to do. So they're transferring the responsibility from one facet of life to, really, it's just like they're living in a wooded area downtown, but it's a wooded area near the river. And they've created this little community. And so they're still being responsible, just in a different way. Do ask yourself, duty to what? Must we bind ourselves to it to the exclusion of personal happiness? The answer is no. In any case, you can do too much for others. Not only will you be used, you will also act as a crutch for people who cannot or will not help themselves. Help others by all means, but do keep a sense of perspective and balance. How often have people thrown away their entire happiness and personal advancement because of some sense of duty to another person or to a cause? Their reward, wasted opportunity, and a pat on the back. The alternative could have been much more beneficial to all concerned if common sense had been allowed to rule the matter. Depression. This is fast becoming a modern disease thanks to the efforts of a medical profession that prescribes drugs rather than common sense. We all get depressed, but there is only one solution. Get rid of depression. It is an acceptance of negative thinking to a chronic degree, and if allowed to continue, is bound to influence your future. Kill it stone dead now. By far the best solution is to break the pattern which caused it. Too much work, too much worry, too many problems. Get out in the fresh air, change your routine, and fill your mind with optimism rather than despair. Go into the silence of your mind, discover the peace therein, and spend time casting your mind over pleasant events, whether from the past or pure inventions. Learn to relax. It is a marvelous tonic, and remember the truth about life. Worry. Despite the fact that most people are now addicted to worry, it solves nothing. In fact, it can only add to the problem and help ruin your state of mind and your health. Worry implies uncertainty. As an occultist, you have to develop the positive side of yourself. This means learning to be certain. Instead of indulging in the uncertainties of worry, stop, relax, and bring the mind around to creative thinking. Worry is a habit. Change it. Loneliness. There's a great deal of difference between the natural need to find seclusion and peace and merely to shut out the world and other people. Often there is a deep-rooted belief that other people may hurt the victim of loneliness, and so to prevent this, he or she retreats into himself and without realizing what is actually happening. The cure for loneliness is to make a positive effort to make contact with other people and to drop what is in effect lack of self-confidence. Use creative thinking to see yourself meeting others and gaining the resultant happiness that this is bound to bring. Something to say about that. I'm really okay with a lot of things he's saying, that when people are acting this way, in a lot of cases there are circumstances where it takes tremendous effort to change your life circumstance, and you have to do things out of routine that you know are not getting results. So you may be doing something just to survive, be social, just so you don't have to be lonely and depressed, and it just gets you through the period. But even though you're social, you might not really want to be there, because let's say as you get older, you realize that you've been doing these things all different ways and you're still getting the same results. Even though you're doing it different ways, you're still getting the same results. So you can't figure out something different. Or you may have a little bit of fear, or you're in a situation where you can't really do something drastically different. One thing I would say about that this is true. I think this happens to people, but when studying astrology, we think of the Saturn return, the second Saturn return, and how people can be released, so to speak. And that, maybe you go 5 years like that and you think it's not going to change, but maybe in 10 years it does. And I have noticed that in my study of my own astrology and just study of astrology in general and talking to people, that these things actually do happen where, someone in their 40s or their 50s has a drastic life change. They never could be in a relationship. All of a sudden now they're in a relationship after 20 years of no relationships. Or all of a sudden they have success after 20 years of trying and getting nowhere. So the stuff that he's talking about is important to hang in there until that moment. And that's Saturn, the patience. Think of the idea of the Saturn return and having to wait for the Saturn return, or the second Saturn return, or the third Saturn return. Death phobias. Contrary to popular opinion, Saturn is not the planet of death. This properly belongs to Pluto. The idea of the Grim Reaper and other idiotic concepts were given to us by religion. I have a book by Alan Leo that I just talked about in another series. It's called Saturn. I think it's called Saturn the Reaper, something like that. And it's got like this grim look to it, but it's not really all about that. There is nothing to fear about death, for it is a natural process that we must all face. Part of the problem is fear of retribution, about, again, a religious stupidity inflicted on the masses by ignorant priests and incidentally still perpetuated in various forms by today's occult teachers. There is no retribution, nor are there penalties or places of divine torture such as hell. When you pass from this earth life, you return to peaceful state that you came from. You are not made to pay for your sins. All in all, Saturn is a beneficial planet, despite its supposed malefic reputation. How many people have a strong Saturn in their chart? Or have Saturn, right now it's Saturn's sun. It's literally a Saturn-Sun conjunction. I chose to do this. I did not plan this. I picked Saturn at the last second. And without thinking about that. And people have Saturn in their chart. Prominent Saturns. And they do not have these negative things in their life predominantly. Depression, worry, loneliness. They have experiences of them. Some of them don't. Meditations on its energy and its nature will reveal much to those who concern themselves with such matters as opposed to simply accepting the written word or the dogma of priests. Use the planet. It is part of you and it is your friend. Remember that as you believe, so you are. In other words, if you allow the more negative tendencies of Saturn to rule your life by believing in such things, this will color your life accordingly. Far better to use it constructively, not only to remove negative belief patterns, but to help you achieve your aims. Saturn aids those who are ambitious and seek to consolidate material goods. This is the real purpose of Saturn. Aids those who are ambitious and seek to consolidate material goods. This is the real purpose of Saturn. Really, Saturn, the planets aren't to be feared. And people are other people are to be feared. Because, I'm joking. I'm saying, but like, the use of the planets, the expression of the energies of planets in other people, other cultures, certain religions, etc. That's to be feared because they are not conscious that they are using these energies and how they're using these energies. That is to be feared. Planetary glyph. He gives the planetary glyph there. And I want to say something about that book, like the Saturn, the fear. Oftentimes occultists will present things like astrology in a fearful way. The Kabbalah or just anything in the occult. Because it's kind of a game they play, because they think they know that the blind, so to speak, masses will not see, so they kind of mock them in a way. They won't get it anyway. They know they're going to be afraid no matter what they do, so they mock them, or some of them say that they test them. they test them to see if you're fearful, then you're not going to get through the door, the invisible door. It's like having those gargoyles guarding your palace or your house to scare people, and there's nothing really to be afraid of. And the ones who are afraid will get through the door. Those who are will not, because they're not deserving. They haven't done the work. The triangle, planetary symbol, the triangle, color black, metal lead, incense, musk. Use for magic, business matters, delays, land dealings, oppression, cultivation of patience, endurance, stability, professional matters and one's profession, property, self-control, ambitions and career, personal security. Wow, this was a long one. I don't know if there's anyone still here. There's the book. And thanks for watching.